Jayla Joanne had exactly 12 minutes to make the interview that would change her life. 12 minutes from the Red Line platform to the Preston and Lloyd Tower on Wacker Drive. 12 minutes to stop being the girl who scraped together rent in a Pilsen studio every month. 12 minutes to prove that business degree from DePaul meant something more than student debt. Her only decent blazer clung to her skin in the thick August heat. The portfolio pressed against her ribs felt heavier with each block. She cut through the morning rush, dodging tourists and commuters, her heels clicking fast against the concrete. Then she heard it. A sound that cut through traffic noise and conversation. Raw, strangled, wrong. Someone was dying. Jayla's pace faltered. 9 minutes left on the clock. 9 minutes to everything she'd worked toward. The sound tore through the air again. Coming from the narrow gap between an abandoned Walgreens and a construction site wrapped in chain link. Keep walking. That's what you do in this city. Eyes forward, mind your business, survive. But something in that sound hooked into her chest and pulled. Jayla turned into the alley. Before we get into this, just settle in and breathe. You're about to experience a story that will grab you and not let go. If you're loving what you're hearing, we'd really appreciate knowing where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment. Are you watching from California, Denver, Louisiana, or maybe Michigan? And if werewolf tales like this hit different for you, smash that like button, subscribe to Gracie Werewolf Story Bank, hit the notification bell, and share this with someone who gets it. Now, let's get into the story. A man lay crumpled against a rusted dumpster, clothes shredded, skin drained of color. Blood spread dark and wet beneath him on the broken pavement. Each breath he took sounded like it might be his last. But it wasn't the blood that froze her in place. It was his eyes. Gold. Burning. Absolutely not human. Every nerve in her body screamed, run. Turn around. Forget you saw this. Then his gaze found hers, locked on with an intensity that hit like a physical force. Something deep in her chest responded. Clicked. Like a lock turning that couldn't be undone. Help me. His voice barely made it past his lips. Jayla's knees hit the pavement before her brain caught up. I'm calling.
No.
His hand snapped out, fingers wrapping her wrist with impossible strength for someone half dead. They'll find me. His jaw worked. Pain carved lines around his mouth.
Please.
Just get me somewhere safe. Her phone vibrated. The alarm. 7 minutes until the interview. 7 minutes until the future she'd been building since she was 18. She looked at him, at the gold fire in his eyes, at the desperation etched into every line of his face, and made a decision that would cost her everything.
All right.
But you need to move with me. Getting him into the lift became a blur of adrenaline and improvised lies. Something about a cycling accident. The driver kept glancing in the rearview mirror, but the cash tip Jayla promised kept him quiet. Hauling him up 3 flights of stairs to her apartment nearly broke her. By the time she kicked the door shut and lowered him onto her couch, sweat soaked through her blazer and her arms shook. The interview slot had closed 5 minutes ago. For years of late-night studying, of juggling 2 jobs, of believing in a better life, gone. For a stranger bleeding out on furniture she'd bought secondhand. Jayla grabbed the first aid kit from her bathroom cabinet and dropped beside him again. His eyes had closed. His breathing came too shallow, too fast.
Hey. Stay here with me.
What's your name? His eyes opened slowly. He stared at her like she was something impossible. Something he couldn't process. Andrew. Okay, Andrew.
I'm Jayla.
And you're going to tell me exactly what happened. You won't believe it. She pressed gauze against the worst wound on his side, deep gouges that looked like something with claws had tried to rip him open. Try me anyway. His mouth twisted. I was supposed to die this morning. My own people tried to make it happen. Jayla's hands went still. Your people? I'm a werewolf, Jayla. So are the ones hunting me. She should have laughed. Should have thrown him out. Should have done anything rational. Instead, she kept working on his wounds. Because somewhere beneath logic, beneath everything she thought she knew about the world, she believed him. Those eyes. The injuries that nothing human could inflict. The way her entire body had recognized him the second she'd seen him, like answering a question she hadn't known to ask. Why would they want you dead? Andrew's voice came rough. Because I wouldn't let them start a war. Our world has rules, treaties between territories, agreements that keep us hidden. The council voted to break them. I refused. So, they decided to kill you. They tried to make it look legitimate. A challenge during a full moon hunt that went wrong. Except I'm faster than they calculated. He flinched as she worked. Not fast enough. Jayla rocked back, studying him. Even injured, even drained and bleeding, he filled the space around him with something heavy. Authority, maybe. Threat. The line between them felt thin. Why not a hospital? The pack owns half the ERs in this city. The second I walk into one, they'll know. And they'll finish it. So, what now? Andrew's eyes burned into hers. I survive. Long enough to expose what they did. Long enough to take back what belongs to me. Which is Chicago. I'm the Alpha King. Or I was, until 3 hours ago. Jayla spent the next 2 hours keeping Andrew alive. She cleaned wounds that should have needed a surgical team. She watched his skin heal faster than biology allowed. She felt everything she understood about reality crack open and reform around this new, impossible truth. Werewolves existed, and she'd just saved their king. When Andrew finally fell into unconsciousness, Jayla sat on the floor and pulled out her phone. 7 missed calls from Preston and Lloyd. 3 voicemails that got colder with each one. The last message made it crystal clear. They'd moved forward with other candidates. The job was gone. She should have felt crushed. Should have been furious at the stranger currently unconscious on her couch. Instead, something else moved through her chest. Like everything before this moment had been the waiting room, and her actual life was just now starting. Andrew woke 3 hours later with Jayla's name on his lips and a bond forming that neither of them understood. But in 72 hours, that bond would either save them both or mark her for death. Episode 2. When Andrew opened his eyes again, darkness had swallowed the apartment except for the amber glow of street lights bleeding through cheap curtains. Jayla sat in the chair across from him, knees pulled tight to her chest, watching him with an expression that held no fear, just calculation. "You're still here," he said, voice scraped raw. "It's my apartment. You know what I mean."
She did.
Most humans would have bolted the second they understood what he was. The smart ones would have already called someone. Anyone. "How do you feel?" she asked instead of acknowledging the truth between them. Andrew sat up carefully, testing his body. The wounds had already knit themselves halfway closed, the screaming pain reduced to a persistent throb. Another day, and there'd be nothing left but scars. Better. Because of you. Don't thank me yet. You're about to explain everything. Over the next hour, Andrew laid it out. The supernatural world that existed inside Chicago's normal one, invisible and ancient. The 4 major packs controlling different territories, North Side, South Side, West Loop, and Lakefront. The Council of Alphas that maintained peace and kept their existence buried from human awareness. How he'd led that council for 6 years, holding the treaties together, preventing the kind of exposure that would turn them all into hunted animals. And Dominic Castellano, Alpha of the North Side Pack. A wolf who'd been pushing for war, for expansion, for breaking the divide between human and supernatural. Who believed werewolves deserved to take what they wanted by force. The council meeting was supposed to be standard procedure, Andrew said, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. A full moon gathering in Lincoln Park, away from human traffic. Dominic issued a challenge. Should have been formal, first blood, witnesses, protocol. Instead, his entire pack came at me at once. The other alphas just watched. Andrew's laugh carried no humor. Dominic promised them territory if they stayed out of it. By the time I understood what was happening, I was bleeding out behind a dumpster. Jayla absorbed this. So now what? You hide here while you heal?
No.
I take back what belongs to me. But I need proof of what Dominic did. I need witnesses willing to testify before the regional council. And I need it before the next full moon. When? 14 days. Jayla stood and moved to her window, staring out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere in that sprawl of lights and steel, an entire hidden world operated. Predators walking through crowds. Politics that killed. She should tell him to leave. Should want distance from all of this. Instead, she turned back. What do you need from me? Andrew stared at her. You're not part of this, Jayla. You saved my life. That's more than enough. I won't drag you into danger. Too late. The second I stepped into that alley, I dragged myself in. You don't understand what you're. Then make me understand. Andrew stood, crossing the narrow space between them. Up close, Jayla could see the gold threading through his irises. Could feel the heat coming off his skin, the barely leashed energy that vibrated just beneath the surface. When you touched me in that alley, he said, voice low, something happened. Something I wasn't prepared for. Jayla's pulse kicked hard. What? A bond. Between us. I felt it the instant your hand made contact. It's why I could heal this fast. Why I'm standing here instead of dying. Your presence, your proximity, it's feeding my wolf. I don't follow. Neither do I completely. Bonds like this, they're rare. They usually only form between mates. The words settled in the air between them like a live wire. Mates, Jayla repeated, testing the shape of it. It doesn't mean we're. Andrew stopped, searching for words. It's complicated. Wolf bonds aren't like human relationships. They're instinct. Primal recognition. When a wolf finds their mate, it's not a decision. It's a fact. And you're telling me I'm your mate. I'm telling you my wolf believes you are. And if my pack discovers you exist, if Dominic learns about you, he'll use you as leverage. You become a weapon pointed at me. A vulnerability. Jayla's hands curled into fists. I'm not vulnerable. That's not. Andrew caught the flash of her eyes, adjusted. I know you're not. But in their world, you're human. That makes you a target. So, what's your plan? I pretend this never happened? Go back to job hunting? Yes.
No.
Andrew's jaw hardened. Jayla, you said you need proof. Witnesses. You need to expose what Dominic did before the full moon, right? Yes, but... So use me. What? Jayla moved closer, her mind already racing through angles and strategies. 4 years of business classes suddenly relevant in ways her professors never imagined. Dominic doesn't know I exist. No one does. That makes me invisible. I can access places you can't. Talk to people who wouldn't give you the time of day. If we're going to prove what he did, we need intelligence, and I can get it. Absolutely not.
Why?
Because I'm human. Because I won't trade your life for my crown. What if it's bigger than your crown? Jayla fired back. You said Dominic wants war. Wants to expose your world. What happens to people like me when that war breaks out? We become casualties. At least this way, I'm fighting instead of waiting to get caught in the crossfire. Andrew stared at her, something shifting behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or the beginning of respect. You have no idea what you're volunteering for. Then show me. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Andrew spoke, quiet and firm. If we do this, if I agree to let you help, you follow my instructions. When I tell you to run, you run. When I tell you to hide, you disappear. Clear? Jayla held his gaze.
Clear.
And we move carefully. Dominic has informants everywhere. If he even catches a hint that you're connected to me, he won't. Just another person trying to survive in this city. Andrew's mouth almost curved. You're considerably more than that. Heat climbed Jayla's neck, and she looked away fast. So, where do we start? With someone who might actually cooperate. Someone who witnessed that meeting and has more integrity than the others combined. Who? Natasha Kincaid, alpha of the Lakefront Pack. She didn't join the ambush, but she didn't intervene either. If I can convince her to testify, then we have a witness. Then we have a foundation. Jayla grabbed her jacket from the chair. Let's go. Andrew caught her wrist gently. Not tonight. Tonight you recover. Tomorrow we strategize. Because once we start this, Jayla, there's no reversing it. She met his eyes, saw the warning carved into every line of his face. The danger. And dismissed it entirely.
Good, she said.
I'm done with reversing anyway. Andrew studied her for another moment, then released her wrist. But his fingers lingered just slightly too long, and Jayla felt the contact like electricity. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow changes everything. Jayla nodded and headed toward her bedroom, but paused at the doorway. Andrew? Yeah. Thank you for telling me the truth. Something in his expression softened. Thank you for not running when you heard it. She disappeared into her room, and Andrew stood alone in the dim apartment, feeling the bond between them pulse like a second heartbeat. He'd told her the truth. What he hadn't told her was that mate bonds were permanent. That once formed, they couldn't be severed without destroying both parties. That her life was now tied to his in ways neither of them could escape. And he definitely hadn't told her that Dominic would smell the bond on him the second they were in the same room, and would hunt her down just to watch Andrew break. Some truths, he decided, could wait until morning. What Jayla didn't know was that the bond between them was already rippling outward through the city. And in a penthouse suite overlooking the Chicago River, Dominic Castellano smiled when his tracker reported that Andrew Joshua wasn't dead. Because now he had something far better than a corpse. He had bait. Episode 3. The next morning, Jayla woke to find Andrew standing at her kitchen counter, looking significantly better than he had 12 hours ago. Also significantly larger, somehow, in her tiny apartment. You heal fast, she said, moving into the kitchen. One of the perks. He gestured toward the coffee pot. Made coffee. Hope that's all right. You broke into my kitchen. We're past asking permission. His mouth almost curved. Valid. Jayla poured herself a mug and leaned against the counter, studying him. Morning light revealed details she'd missed before. Late 30s, maybe. Strong features, dark hair that looked like he'd been dragging his hands through it all night. The kind of face that belonged in boardrooms and on magazine covers. Sharp, confident, contained. Except for his eyes. Those gold-threaded eyes that held something untamed.
So, she said.
Natasha Kincaid. How do we approach her? Carefully. Natasha controls the lakefront territory, everything from Navy Pier down to Hyde Park. She's old guard, which means she respects tradition and hierarchy. She didn't approve of what Dominic did, but she won't testify unless she believes it serves her pack. What would convince her? Proof that Dominic is unstable. That he's a threat not just to me, but to the entire structure we've built. Jayla considered this. Where does Natasha spend her time? She owns a private security firm downtown. Kincaid and Associates. Legitimate operation. Completely legal. Half her pack works there. So we go to her office. Not we.
Me.
You stay here. Jayla raised an eyebrow. We had a deal. The deal was you'd help. Not that you'd walk into a building full of werewolves who might catch my scent on you and immediately know we're connected. They can smell that. We can smell everything. Fear, desire, deception, bonds. Andrew's eyes darkened slightly. Especially bonds. Heat crept up Jayla's neck, and she quickly pivoted. Then we need a different strategy. What if we don't go to her office? What if we catch her somewhere neutral? Somewhere public enough that she can't make a scene? Andrew tilted his head, thinking. There's a charity gala tomorrow night at the Drake Hotel. Annual fundraiser for Lincoln Park Zoo. Every major alpha in Chicago attends. It's neutral ground, and it maintains appearances for the human world. Natasha will be there. Perfect. We go to the gala. I can't just walk into that event, Jayla. Every wolf in the city thinks I'm dead. The second I appear. Then you don't appear as you. You appear as my date. Andrew blinked. What? Think about it. Dominic wants everyone believing you're dead, right? He'll be at the gala playing Alpha King, accepting sympathies, consolidating power. He won't expect you to walk through the front door with a human on your arm. We use the surprise. It's too dangerous. It's brilliant. One public appearance, you talk to Natasha, we leave. Clean and efficient. Nothing about this is clean or efficient. Do you have a better option? Andrew stared at her for a long moment, then exhaled roughly. This is reckless. Is that a yes? That's a if we do this, we do it exactly my way. Jayla grinned. I can work with that. The next 36 hours compressed into a crash course in survival. Andrew taught Jayla the fundamentals of wolf culture, the hierarchies, the territories, the unspoken rules that governed supernatural society. How to identify an alpha by the way they moved through space. How to spot a challenge before it turned violent. How to navigate their world without marking herself as prey. Most humans don't register werewolves, Andrew explained as they sat on her couch, his laptop open between them displaying photos of Chicago's major pack leaders. We've spent centuries perfecting invisibility, but the ones who do register us? They us. Usually don't survive long enough to spread the word. Reassuring. I'm trying to keep you breathing, not comfortable. Jayla examined the photos. Dominic Castellano looked exactly like what he was lethal. Handsome in a calculated, cold way. The kind of man who wore custom suits and smiled with too many teeth. He looks like a CEO. He is one. That's what makes him effective. Dominic doesn't just want power. He wants legitimacy. He wants the supernatural world to stop hiding and start claiming what he thinks we deserve. By force. By whatever means work. Jayla looked at Andrew. And, what do you want? The question seemed to catch him off guard.
Peace.
Balance. A world where both humans and supernaturals can exist without destroying each other. That's a good speech. But what do you actually want, Andrew? His eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw past the alpha, past the king, to something raw underneath. I want to stop fighting, he said quietly. I want to build something instead of just defending territory. He stopped, jaw working. It doesn't matter what I want. What matters is stopping Dominic before he starts a war none of us can survive. Jayla reached out and touched his hand. It matters. The bond between them flared, warm and electric. Andrew's fingers curled around hers almost reflexively. Jayla. I know. We need to focus. She pulled her hand back, ignoring the way her skin buzzed where he'd touched her.
So,
tomorrow night. What does someone wear to a werewolf gala? The answer, apparently, was the most expensive dress Jayla had ever touched. Andrew had it delivered to her apartment the next afternoon, a floor-length gown in deep emerald silk. This is excessive, she called from her bedroom as she worked the zipper. It's necessary, Andrew called back. You need to look like you belong in that room. Jayla studied herself in the mirror. The dress fit like it had been made for her body, hugging curves in exactly the right places before flowing to the floor. She looked wealthy, confident, like someone who had every right to walk into the Drake Hotel on the arm of the city's most dangerous man. She stepped out of the bedroom. Andrew went completely still. Will this work? She asked, suddenly self-conscious under the weight of his gaze. Yes. His voice came out rougher than usual. That will work. The air between them thickened. Jayla felt the bond pull taut, felt her pulse accelerate in response to the way he was looking at her, like she was something dangerous. Something necessary. We should leave, she said quickly. Don't want to be late. Andrew nodded, but he didn't move.
Jayla.
Before we do this, I need you to understand. If something goes wrong tonight, if Dominic realizes what we're doing, I run. I hide. You already told me.
No.
Andrew crossed the space between them, his hands framing her face with unexpected gentleness. If something goes wrong, you get out. You don't wait for me. You don't try to help. You get out and you vanish. Promise me. Jayla looked up at him, saw the fierce protectiveness carved into his expression, and felt something crack open in her chest. I promise, she lied. Andrew studied her face for another moment, then dropped his hands. Let's go. The Drake Hotel burned with light against the night sky. Jayla had walked past it countless times, a historic landmark on the Magnificent Mile, the kind of place that hosted presidents and film stars. She'd never imagined walking inside. Andrew's hand rested against the small of her back as they approached the entrance, warm even through the silk of her dress. To anyone watching, they looked like any other affluent couple attending a charity event. No one could see the tension coiled in his shoulders, the way his eyes cataloged every movement in the crowd. The predator just beneath the civilized veneer. "Remember," he murmured as they stepped inside. "Stay close. Don't engage unless I do. And if I tell you to leave." "I know." The ballroom stole Jayla's breath. Crystal chandeliers caught light and scattered it across marble floors. Everywhere. Dozens of people in evening wear, champagne glasses balanced in elegant hands, mingling with the ease of old wealth and older power. And underneath the polished surface, Jayla felt it. The threat. These weren't just wealthy Chicagoans. They were predators. Alphas and pack members, all performing humanity for one night. Andrew's hand tightened slightly against her back. A warning. Jayla scanned the crowd and understood why. Wolves were watching them. Not obviously. They were too skilled for that, but she could feel the weight of their attention. The way conversations paused fractionally as they passed. The way eyes tracked their movement across the room. They knew something was wrong. They just hadn't figured out what yet. "He's here," Andrew said quietly. Jayla followed his gaze across the ballroom. Dominic Castellano stood near the bar, surrounded by admirers. He wore a tuxedo like armor, his smile easy and magnetic as he held court. Everything about him radiated control, from the way he stood to the way people leaned toward him when he spoke. When he saw Andrew, the smile froze on his face. For one perfect second, the entire ballroom seemed to suspend. Then Dominic's smile returned, wider than before. Sharper. "Well," he said, his voice cutting through the sudden quiet. "Look who's not dead." Every conversation in the room stopped. Every eye turned toward them. Jayla felt Andrew's body coil beside her, felt the bond between them vibrate with tension. She forced herself to breathe normally, to keep her expression neutral, even as her heart slammed against her ribs. This was it. The moment that would either save Andrew's kingdom or ignite a war. Andrew stepped forward, Jayla still at his side, and his voice carried across the silent ballroom with absolute authority. "We need to talk, Dominic, about what really happened in Lincoln Park." Andrew stepped forward, Jayla still at his side, and said the words that would either save his kingdom or start a war. "We need to talk, Dominic, about what really happened in Lincoln Park." And in that moment, every wolf in Chicago knew the Alpha King had returned, and he'd brought a human weapon with him. Episode 4. Every eye in the ballroom locked on Andrew and Dominic. Jayla felt the shift immediately, the air growing heavier, charged with the kind of tension that preceded violence. The humans in the room sensed it too, unconsciously retreating, creating space around the two men. Dominic's smile never faltered. "Andrew, we all thought you'd perished in that unfortunate accident. How miraculous that you survived. We both know that. Do we?" Dominic's gaze slid to Jayla, assessing. "And who's your lovely companion? I don't believe we've been introduced." Andrew's hand pressed slightly harder against Jayla's back. A warning she felt through the silk. "She's not your concern. Everything in this city is my concern. Now." Dominic took a slow sip of champagne, casual as a knife to the throat. "Seeing as the council voted you out 3 days ago. Posthumously, of course. We held a memorial service. You would have appreciated it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several alphas exchanged glances, some surprised, others calculating potential angles. "A council vote requires all alphas present," Andrew said, voice level as steel. "Last I checked, attempted murder doesn't count as proper resignation." "Attempted?" Dominic raised an eyebrow. "You seem very much alive. So, what exactly are you accusing me of?" "Ambush. Breaking pack law. Violating the treaty that keeps this city from tearing itself apart." That's quite an accusation. Do you have proof? I'm working on it. Dominic's smile sharpened like broken glass. Then I suppose we have nothing to discuss until you do. Enjoy the party, Andrew. What's left of it? He turned back to the crowd, dismissing them like they were irrelevant noise. But Andrew didn't move. Natasha. Across the ballroom, a woman in a stunning silver gown turned. She was striking, late 40s, with dark skin and silver-streaked hair pulled into an elegant updo. Everything about her radiated contained power, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. Natasha Kincaid met Andrew's eyes for a long moment. Then, deliberately, she walked toward them. Dominic's smile finally cracked at the edges. Alpha Kincaid, Andrew said with formal precision. I request a moment of your time. Natasha's gaze swept over him, then Jayla, then returned to Andrew. You look remarkably well for a dead man. Healing is one of my strengths. Apparently so. She glanced at Dominic. I trust you don't mind if I speak with our guest. Dominic's jaw tightened visibly. By all means, though I can't fathom what there is to discuss. Protocol, mostly. The rules regarding alpha succession. Natasha turned back to Andrew. Walk with me. They stepped onto one of the Drake's private balconies overlooking Lake Michigan. The moment the door sealed behind them, Natasha's pleasant expression evaporated. You have 30 seconds to convince me not to let Dominic finish what he started. He ambushed me, Andrew said without preamble. 7 against 1. No challenge, no witnesses outside his own pack. That's not pack law, that's murder. So you claim. But you're standing here breathing, and Dominic has 3 other alphas backing his version that you abandoned your position. They're lying. Prove it. Andrew's hands clenched at his sides. I will. But I need time. Time is a luxury you don't possess. The full moon gathering is in 12 days. If you can't present evidence before the regional council by then, Dominic's position becomes permanent. Natasha's eyes narrowed. And I don't need to explain what that means for this city. Restructuring. Breaking treaties. Exposing our world to humans who aren't prepared. Her gaze cut to Jayla. Speaking of which, who is she really? Jayla stepped forward before Andrew could intervene. I'm the woman who pulled him out of the alley before your people could finish the job. Natasha's eyebrows rose. Bold. Reckless, but bold. She looked back at Andrew. She's bonded to you. Yes. Does Dominic know? Not yet. Then you're putting her in extraordinary danger. If he discovers she matters to you. I know. Do you? Because right now, that girl is the easiest weapon Dominic has. All he needs to do is take her, hurt her, and you'll shatter. That's what mates do to alphas. They create vulnerabilities. Jayla felt cold spread through her chest, but she kept her voice steady. I'm not as easy to take as you think. Natasha studied her with fresh interest. You're human. That makes you vulnerable by definition. I'm the human who saved Chicago's Alpha King when every supernatural in this city left him bleeding out. That makes me smarter than all of you combined. Silence stretched taut between them. Then Natasha laughed, a genuine, startled sound. I like her, Andrew. She's got steel in her spine. Her expression sobered fast. But steel won't protect her from what's coming. You want my testimony? Fine. But you need more than my word. You need one of Dominic's own pack members to turn. Someone who was actually there when it happened. Who? Vincent Torres. Dominic's second-in-command. He participated in the ambush, but he's old guard. Honorable, in his way. He didn't approve of what Dominic ordered. I saw it in his expression during the council meeting afterward. Andrew shook his head. Vincent won't betray his alpha. He will if you give him sufficient reason. Find out what Dominic has on him. Everyone has leverage, Andrew. You just need to locate it. And if I get Vincent to talk, then I'll testify. I'll call the regional council myself. We'll handle this properly. Natasha moved toward the door, then paused. But Andrew, if you fail, if Dominic consolidates his power, I won't stand against him. I can't risk my pack for your pride. This isn't about pride. Isn't it? She looked back at him, something almost regretful in her eyes. You were an effective alpha king. But maybe it's time to ask yourself if you're fighting to save Chicago, or fighting because you can't accept losing. She left them on the balcony alone. They didn't speak during the drive back to Jayla's apartment. Andrew drove with laser focus, hands tight on the rental car's wheel, constantly checking mirrors for any indication they were being followed. Jayla stared out the window at Chicago's streets sliding past, her city, except now it looked different. Every person they passed could be supernatural. Every shadow could conceal threat. You shouldn't have spoken to Natasha like that, Andrew said finally. Like what? Like you're my equal in front of another alpha. It draws attention. Jayla turned to face him. I thought that was the objective. Make them see I'm not just some random human. There's a difference between making them acknowledge you and making them mark you as a target. They're already targeting me, Andrew. The second Dominic saw us together, I became part of this. Which is exactly why he stopped jaw working. Why I should have left you out of it from the start. Too late now. It's not. You can still walk away. Go stay with family in another state for a few weeks. Let me handle.
No.
Jayla. I said no. She twisted in her seat to face him fully. You don't get to make that decision for me. I'm in this now, and I'm seeing it through. Even if it gets you killed? Even then. Andrew's hands tightened on the wheel. You're impossible. I've heard worse. Despite everything, his mouth curved slightly. I'm certain you have. They pulled up outside Jayla's building. Andrew cut the engine, but didn't move to exit. What Natasha said, he began slowly. About the bond making me vulnerable.
She's right.
In wolf culture, a mate is both strength and weakness. Strength because the bond amplifies everything. Healing, power, instinct. Weakness because... He turned to look at her directly. Because I would burn this entire city down to keep you safe. And Dominic knows how to exploit that. Jayla's breath caught in her throat. Then we don't let him find out. He already suspects. The way I positioned myself with you tonight, the way I reacted when he looked at you, every alpha in that room felt it. So, what do? Andrew was quiet for a long moment. We find Vincent Torres. We get him to talk. And we do it in the next 10 days, before the full moon gathering. How do we find him? I know where he'll be tomorrow night. There's a fight club in Bridgeport, supernatural only, underground. Vincent runs security. If we're going to approach him, that's our window. Jayla unbuckled her seatbelt. Then that's where we go. Andrew caught her hand as she reached for the door handle.
Jayla.
What Natasha said about you being in danger, she wasn't exaggerating. If we keep doing this, if we keep pushing Dominic, he will come after you. And when he does, I might not be fast enough to stop him. Then we better make sure we're prepared. She squeezed his hand once, then stepped out of the car. Andrew followed her up to the apartment, and this time, neither of them pretended he was going to leave. Inside, Jayla kicked off her heels and felt the tension of the night settle into her bones. Andrew stood by the window, staring out at the city, like he was memorizing it. You're scared, Jayla said quietly. He didn't turn around. Not of Dominic. Not of losing my position. Of what happens to you because you decided to help me. Jayla walked over and stood beside him. I didn't decide to help you because you're the Alpha King. I decided because in that alley, you were just someone who needed help. And I'm still here because what Dominic wants to do, exposing your world, starting a war, that affects everyone, including me. Andrew turned to face her, and in the dim light from the window, his eyes burned gold. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, he said softly, or the most reckless. Can't I be both? His hand came up to touch her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. The bond between them flared hot and electric, and Jayla felt her pulse spike in response. This bond, she whispered. What does it mean, really? It means you're mine. Andrew's voice dropped lower. And I'm yours. It means every instinct I have is screaming at me to protect you, claim you, keep you safe. It means I'm fighting myself every second not to lock you somewhere Dominic can't reach you. But you won't.
No.
Because you'd never forgive me. His hand dropped. And, because you're right, this is bigger than just me. Jayla felt something shift between them, an understanding maybe, or an acceptance of what they were becoming to each other.
Tomorrow night, she said.
We go to Bridgeport. We find Vincent. We get the truth. Andrew nodded. Tomorrow night. But as Jayla headed toward her bedroom, she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out faster than either of them realized. What they didn't know was that across the city, in a renovated warehouse in the West Loop, Dominic Castellano made a phone call. Find everything on the human girl, he said into the phone. Family, friends, employment history, debts, I want leverage. And I want it by tomorrow night. He disconnected and smiled. Because Vincent Torres wasn't the only one with secrets worth exploiting. Episode 5. The building looked abandoned from the outside. Jayla stood beside Andrew in the parking lot of what used to be a meatpacking plant in Bridgeport, surrounded by industrial decay and the kind of Chicago neighborhood where people knew not to ask questions. This is it, she asked. Appearances matter. The best way to hide something supernatural is to make it look condemned. Andrew glanced at her. Last chance to wait in the car. Not happening. Then stay close. And remember, in there, you're not my mate. You're my asset. Something I'm using, not something I care about. It's the only way to keep you safe. The words stung more than they should have. Got it. I'm your tool. Jayla. I understand the strategy, Andrew. Let's just do this. They crossed the empty lot and descended a concrete stairwell that led underground. The moment they opened the steel door at the bottom, sound hit them like a physical wall.
Roaring.
Cheering. The wet crack of flesh hitting flesh. The Fight Club was exactly what Jayla expected and somehow worse, a converted basement with a makeshift ring in the center, surrounded by maybe 60 people. All supernatural. All watching two wolves tear into each other with barely restrained violence while money changed hands in the crowd. Blood splattered across concrete. The fighters moved with speed that made Jayla's eyes ache trying to track them. This wasn't entertainment. This was barely controlled carnage. Vincent's at the back, Andrew murmured, nodding toward a raised platform where several men stood watching the fight. Vincent Torres was impossible to miss. Late 40s, built like someone who'd spent decades fighting with silver thread. ING through his dark hair, and a scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw. He held himself with the stillness of a man who didn't need to prove his danger. Everyone already knew. How do we approach him? We don't. Not here, not in front of his pack. Andrew scanned the crowd. We wait until the fights end and catch him leaving. In the meantime, we watch and we don't draw attention. But drawing attention was exactly what happened. Well. A voice cut through the noise. Andrew Joshua. Heard you were dead. A man shouldered through the crowd toward them. Younger, maybe mid-20s, with the kind of cocky smile that preceded violence. Behind him, 3 other wolves followed, all radiating aggressive energy that came from youth and too much power. Curtis, Andrew said evenly. Not tonight. Why not? You're in our territory now. North Side rules apply here. Curtis's eyes slid to Jayla, and something predatory flickered in them. And you brought a human. That's interesting. She's none of your concern. Everything in this building is my concern. I'm pack security. Curtis stepped closer, deliberately invading Jayla's space. What's your name, sweetheart? None of your business, Jayla said firmly. Curtis laughed. She's got fire. I like that. His hand reached out toward her face. Andrew moved so fast Jayla barely registered it. 1 second Curtis was standing, the next he was on his knees with Andrew's hand locked around his throat, forcing him down with irresistible strength. The entire room went silent. Touch her, Andrew said quietly, and I'll rip your spine out through your chest. Are we clear? Curtis's face purpled, but he managed to nod. Andrew released him and stepped back. Good. Now walk away. Curtis scrambled to his feet, humiliation burning in his eyes. You're dead, old man. You just don't know it yet. He and his pack melted back into the crowd, but the damage was done. Every eye in the room was now on Andrew and Jayla. And on the platform at the back, Vincent Torres watched with unreadable intensity. "So much for not drawing attention," Jayla muttered. "Change of plans. We leave."
Now.
But as they turned toward the exit, Vincent's voice carried across the room. "Andrew, a word." They followed Vincent to a private office on the second floor. A sparse room with concrete walls, a desk, and the lingering smell of blood and sweat from the fights below. Vincent closed the door and leaned against it, studying them both. "You know showing up here was monumentally stupid, right? I needed to talk to you. So talk." Andrew laid it out cleanly. The ambush, Dominic's betrayal, the need for witnesses before the full moon gathering. Vincent listened without interruption, his scarred face revealing nothing. When Andrew finished, Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "You're asking me to betray my alpha," he finally said. "I'm asking you to do the right thing. Those aren't the same thing in our world. You know that. I also know you didn't agree with what Dominic did. Natasha saw it. I'm betting every wolf in that meeting saw it." Vincent's jaw tightened. "What I agree with doesn't matter. It matters to me. It should matter to you." Andrew leaned forward. "Vincent, your old guard. You remember what Chicago was like before the treaties, the territorial wars, the exposure events that nearly got us all hunted. The council exists to prevent that. Dominic's breaking every law we built. To make us stronger. To satisfy his ego." Vincent stood abruptly, pacing to the small window that looked out over the fight pit below. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't see what he's becoming?" He turned back, and for the first time, Jayla saw the exhaustion beneath his controlled exterior. "But he's still my alpha. And pack law is clear. You don't turn on your alpha. Even when your alpha is destroying everything you've built." Even then, Jayla had stayed quiet through the entire exchange, but now she stepped forward. "Can I ask you something?" Vincent's eyes flicked to her, surprised. "You're the human. I'm the human who's trying to understand. You served under Andrew for 6 years, right? When he was Alpha King?" "Yes." "And in those 6 years, did he ever order something that went against pack law? Did he ever betray the treaties or put your people in unnecessary danger?" Vincent's expression hardened.
No.
He didn't. But Dominic has. In less than a week. Jayla held his gaze. "I'm human. I don't understand all your rules and hierarchies. But I understand loyalty. And I understand the difference between following orders and following someone worth following. So I'm asking you, which one is Dominic?" Silence filled the room. Then Vincent exhaled roughly and sat back down. 3 months ago, Dominic ordered a hit on a human journalist. Woman was investigating corporate corruption, got too close to one of our front businesses. Dominic said she was a threat to exposure. I was the one who had to carry out the order. Andrew went very still. "Did you?"
No.
"I made it look like I did, faked her death, got her out of the city, new identity." Dominic never found out. Vincent's hands clenched on the desk. "But I've been waiting for him to figure it out ever since. When he does, he'll kill me and everyone I care about. That's who Dominic is. That's what your question answers. Then help us stop him. And paint an even bigger target on my back, on my family. Or you can wait for him to find out about the journalist and kill you anyway," Andrew said quietly. "At least this way, you go down fighting for something." Vincent stared at him for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to a filing cabinet in the corner, and pulled out a folder. "The ambush wasn't spontaneous," he said, sliding the folder across the desk. "Dominic planned it for 2 weeks. Had contingencies, backup plans, witnesses paid off. This folder has the communications. Texts, emails, meeting records. Everything you need to prove premeditation." Andrew opened the folder, his expression darkening as he scanned the contents. "Where did you get this?" "I'm his second. I see everything." Vincent's mouth twisted. "And I've been documenting everything since the journalist. Insurance policy. This is enough. With this and Natasha's testimony, There's more. Vincent pulled out a second folder. Dominic's been meeting with someone outside the city. Another alpha from the Milwaukee territory. They're planning something bigger than Chicago, a coordinated move across the entire Midwest. Your ambush was just the beginning. Jayla felt ice slide down her spine. How big? 6 cities. Multiple territories. They want to reshape the entire regional council structure. Vincent looked at Andrew. You are never going to survive this, even if you'd seen the ambush coming. Dominic needed you gone to move forward. And once you were dead, no one else would have been strong enough to stop him. Andrew's hands clenched on the folder. We need to warn the regional council immediately.
No.
Vincent shook his head. You go to them now, with just this evidence, and Dominic will spin it as desperate fabrication from a dethroned alpha. You need to present this at the full moon gathering, in front of every alpha in the region. Make it impossible for them to ignore or dismiss. That's 10 days away. Then you have 10 days to stay alive. Vincent moved to the door. And you need to leave now. Curtis will report that you are here, and Dominic will have people watching your movements within the hour. Andrew stood, the folders tucked under his arm. Vincent. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just stop him. Because if you don't... Vincent glanced at Jayla. That journalist I saved? She had a daughter. 8 years old. That's who Dominic threatened when he ordered the hit. He doesn't just kill threats. He destroys everything they love. So, whatever bond you've got with this human, hide it better. Or she won't survive the next 10 days. They made it to the parking lot before everything went wrong. Jayla saw the movement first, shadows detaching from the darkness between buildings. Too many shadows. Moving too fast. Andrew. He pushed her behind him just as the first wolf emerged from the darkness. Curtis. With 6 pack members backing him. Did you really think you could come to our territory and disrespect me in front of everyone? Curtis's eyes glowed in the darkness, the gold of a wolf too close to the surface. Dominic said to make it look like an accident. But you know what? I think a direct challenge sounds better. I'm not fighting you, Curtis. Then you'll die easy. They attacked as a pack, coordinated, vicious, designed to overwhelm through sheer numbers. Andrew met them head-on. Jayla had seen Andrew move before, but never like this. Never fully unleashed. He was a blur of violence and precision, each movement calculated to disable, to survive, to protect. Bone cracked. Blood sprayed. Wolves went down and didn't get back up. But there were too many of them. Curtis hung back, letting his pack do the work, waiting for Andrew to tire. And he was tiring, still healing from the ambush days ago, fighting 7-on-1, pushing his body past what it could sustain. Jayla saw Curtis move toward Andrew's blind side, saw the knife in his hand, silver blade, the kind that would poison a werewolf system, make wounds that couldn't heal.
She didn't think.
Just acted. Grabbed a piece of broken rebar from the ground and swung it with everything she had. The metal connected with Curtis's skull with a sickening crunch. He went down hard, the knife skittering across the pavement. The remaining wolves froze, shocked that a human had just taken down one of their own. Andrew used the distraction to end it. 3 rapid movements, and the last of Curtis's pack was on the ground, unconscious or worse. Silence fell over the parking lot, broken only by labored breathing. Andrew turned to Jayla, his eyes still glowing gold. Blood, not his, splattered across his face and hands. For a moment, she saw the wolf in him fully, the predator barely contained beneath human skin. Then his eyes cleared, and he was Andrew again. You hit him, he said, almost disbelieving. He was going to stab you. You could have been killed. So could you. Andrew crossed to her in 2 strides and pulled her against him, his hand cupping the back of her head, his heart pounding against her ear. Don't ever do that again. I'm not making promises I can't keep. Despite everything, she felt him smile against her hair. Impossible, woman. You keep saying that. I keep meaning it. They stood there for a moment, wrapped in each other, surrounded by unconscious wolves and the lingering scent of violence. Then Andrew pulled back. We need to go. Curtis's pack will report this, and Dominic will know we have Vincent's evidence. So, what do? We hide. We plan. And we prepare for the full moon gathering. He looked down at her, something fierce and possessive burning in his eyes. Because in 10 days this ends, one way or another. They didn't make it home that night. Halfway back to Jayla's apartment, Andrew pulled the car into an abandoned warehouse on the south side, his instincts screaming danger. What is it? Jayla asked. We're being followed. Multiple vehicles. Dominic's not waiting 10 days. Andrew killed the engine and turned to her in the darkness.
Jayla.
If something happens to me tonight, don't. Listen to me. If I don't make it, you run. You take Vincent's evidence straight to Natasha Kincaid. She'll know what to do with it. Andrew, promise me. Jayla met his eyes, saw the fear there, not for himself, but for her, and felt something break open inside her chest. I promise, she whispered. Andrew kissed her then, fierce and desperate and full of everything they hadn't said. Then headlights flooded the warehouse, and the world exploded into chaos. Viewers, I need to pause here and ask you something real. How many of you are watching this right now thinking, this is incredible. Why haven't I subscribed yet? Seriously, drop a comment and tell me. Tell me what country you're watching from. Tell me what's stopping you from hitting that subscribe button and supporting Gracie Werewolf Story Bank. Because if you're this deep into the story and you're not subscribed, that's on you. Don't let this be the one that got away. Subscribe now, or you might miss how this ends. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Episode 6. The warehouse door groaned open, metal scraping against concrete, and Dominic Castellano walked in like he was stepping onto a stage he'd already conquered. 12 wolves materialized behind him, not the sloppy crew from the Fight Club, but something else entirely. These moved with military precision, bodies angled to cover exits, hands loose at their sides in that specific way that meant they knew exactly how fast they could kill. Andrew shifted his weight, positioning himself so Jayla stood directly behind him, his body a wall between her and everything that was about to happen. Dominic's smile was the kind you'd see on a shark right before it bit down. You know what I love about you, Andrew? You're consistent. Predictable as sunrise. I knew the second Vincent walked out of that office, you'd come running here thinking you'd outsmarted me. We have the evidence, Dominic. Communications. Meeting records. Proof you planned the ambush weeks in advance. Evidence. Dominic said the word like it tasted funny. Here's what's interesting about evidence. It only matters if there's someone alive to present it. And the regional council? He checked his watch like he was timing something. Currently occupied with 3 simultaneous territory emergencies. Warehouse fire in Milwaukee. Infrastructure collapse in Indianapolis. Chemical spill in Detroit. Funny how disasters cluster like that. The implication hit like cold water. Andrew's hands curled into fists. You manufactured crises across 3 states just to buy yourself time. I created opportunity. Something you never grasped. You spent 6 years playing diplomat, convincing everyone that peace meant survival. But peace without dominance is just waiting to be conquered by someone hungrier. Dominic's eyes found Jayla, and something predatory slid across his face. Speaking of hunger, let's talk about your human. The temperature in the warehouse seemed to drop 10 degrees. Andrew's voice came out deadly quiet. She's not part of this negotiation. Everything's negotiable when you're desperate enough. And you, old friend, smell desperate. Dominic gestured lazily, and 2 of his wolves peeled off, circling toward Jayla's position. Here's my offer, simple, clean, businesslike. Hand over every copy of Vincent's evidence. Every file, every backup, every piece of information you think gives you leverage. Do that, and I let your human walk out of here breathing. And if I refuse? Dominic's smile widened, showing too many teeth. Then my wolves demonstrate exactly what happens to leverage when it stops being useful.
Slowly.
While you watch. And believe me, Andrew, we'll make sure you watch every second. The warehouse pressed in on all sides. Concrete walls that would muffle screaming, shadows deep enough to hide bodies, the kind of space where terrible things happened and nobody ever found out. Jayla felt Andrew's muscles coil like springs under too much pressure. Felt the war happening inside him through the bond they shared. King versus mate. Duty versus the one person who'd made him remember what it felt like to want something beyond survival. She made the decision before he could tear himself apart over it.
No.
Her voice cut through the tension clean as a blade. Every eye in the warehouse snapped to her. Dominic actually laughed. I'm sorry, did the human just speak? The human just told you to back off. Jayla stepped out from behind Andrew's protective stance before he could physically stop her. Her heart was trying to punch through her ribcage, but her voice stayed level. You want to know what I've been doing this past week while you were busy playing supervillain? Learning. Your laws. Your protocols. Your precious exposure rules that keep your entire world from collapsing. Jayla. Andrew's voice carried a warning she completely ignored. Did you know there's an automatic regional investigation triggered by human death in front of supernatural witnesses? Doesn't matter what kind of chaos you've manufactured elsewhere. Kill a human with witnesses present, and the council has to respond. It's coded into your treaties specifically to prevent exposure incidents. She met Dominic's eyes without flinching. So go ahead. Order your wolves to tear me apart. But the second you do, every alpha in this warehouse becomes a witness, and your entire coup falls apart under mandatory investigation. Dominic's smile finally cracked around the edges. Clever. But you're operating on incomplete information, sweetheart. Who says anyone here will be left to witness anything? I will. The voice came from the warehouse entrance, and it carried the kind of authority that made even dangerous men pause. Vincent Torres stood silhouetted in the doorway, and he wasn't alone. 24 wolves flanked him, all wearing silver bands that marked them as Lakefront Pack, not Dominic's territory, not his people, not under his control. And stepping through that doorway beside Vincent, looking like she'd been carved from marble and disappointment, was Natasha Kincaid.
Dominic.
Natasha's voice could have frosted windows. Threatening to murder humans in my territory, without invitation. That's bold. Stupid, but bold. Dominic's composure fractured for half a second before he locked it back down. This is council business, Natasha. Stay out of it. Council business? You mean the council meeting you try to sabotage by creating emergencies across 3 states? Natasha moved further into the warehouse, her wolves spreading out to cover every exit. Vincent briefed me 2 hours ago. Showed me the evidence. The communications. The premeditation. And now I get to witness you explicitly threatening human murder in front of a 12 wolves. She smiled, and it had nothing warm in it.
So no, Dominic.
I don't think I'll stay out of it. The power dynamic shifted so fast it was almost audible. A physical thing, pressure equalizing, Dominic's certainty cracking like ice under weight. Vincent. Dominic said his second-in-command's name like he was testing whether it would summon loyalty or betrayal. You understand what you're doing? You turn on me, and everyone you love pays the price. Your sister in Detroit. Your nephew in Gary. That cousin you're so protective of in Naperville. I know where they all are. Vincent's scarred face could have been stone. You knew where they were. Past tense. I moved them yesterday. 3 different states, 6 different locations, identities you'll never trace. And before you threatened to hunt them down anyway. He pulled out his phone, held it up so everyone could see. I already sent copies of your communications to 5 regional council members. Kill me, kill everyone in this warehouse, doesn't matter. The evidence survives. Dominic's carefully constructed control shattered. You have no idea what you've just destroyed. The opportunity one was building, the future we could have had. A future built on murder and treaty violations? Andrew's voice cut through Dominic's rage like a knife through fog. That's not evolution, Dominic. That's desperation dressed up in expensive suits and political rhetoric. And what do you offer? 6 more years of stagnation? Playing mediator while the world changes around us. I offer what I've always offered. A world where our people don't have to choose between hiding and extinction. Where we build something sustainable instead of burning through territory like conquistadors. Andrew's eyes blazed gold, his wolf rising just beneath his skin. And unlike you, I'm willing to defend that vision with more than just threats against families and manufacture disasters. Honor doesn't win wars, Andrew. Then let's test that theory. The challenge hung in the air between them, ancient, unmistakable, carrying the weight of laws older than Chicago itself. You and me. Single combat. Winner takes the city. Loser leaves or dies. Right now. Natasha stepped forward before Dominic could respond. As alpha of neutral territory and witness to this confrontation, I acknowledge the formal challenge. Single combat under full moon rules. No interference, no weapons. Fight to submission or death. Do both parties accept terms? Andrew nodded without hesitation. Dominic stared at him for a long moment, calculation flickering behind his eyes. Then his mouth curved into something that might have been a smile, if smiles carried that much malice. Why not? I've been waiting to finish what I started in Lincoln Park anyway. This time, I'll make sure you stay dead. Tomorrow night, Natasha said. Millennium Park. Midnight. Neutral ground. Official council witnesses required. Her gaze swept between them. And may the better alpha win. Aftermath. Natasha's wolves escorted them back to Jayla's apartment. Professional, silent, creating a moving perimeter that kept Dominic's pack from trying anything desperate before the official challenge. The moment Jayla's apartment door closed behind them, Andrew turned on her. What you did back there. His voice was raw, scraped clean of composure. Stepping forward like that, putting yourself between me and Dominic's wolves. You could have died, Jayla. One wrong word, one miscalculation, and you'd be dead. But I'm not dead. I'm standing right here. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Jayla threw her jacket toward the chair, missing, not caring. Adrenaline still screamed through her bloodstream, making her hands shake and her words come out sharper than she meant. We got what we needed. Vincent turned, Natasha witnessed everything. We backed Dominic into accepting the challenge. We won that confrontation, Andrew. We almost lost you in that confrontation. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands framing her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Do you understand what would have happened if Natasha hadn't shown up? If Vincent had been 30 seconds later, Dominic would have ordered his wolves to tear you apart just to prove he could, and I would have had to stand there and watch because the second I moved, you'd be dead anyway. But that's not what happened. It could have. His voice cracked around the edges. And tomorrow night, when I'm fighting Dominic, the only thing running through my head will be whether you're safe. Whether Dominic sent wolves to your apartment while I'm occupied. Whether this whole challenge is just another distraction while he takes the one thing I can't afford to lose. Jayla reached up, covering his hands with hers. Then don't think about me tomorrow night. Think about winning. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. She pulled his hands down but didn't let go. You're the Alpha King, Andrew. You've protected this entire city for 6 years. One more fight, and you take back everything Dominic stole. So stop thinking about me, and start thinking about how you're going to tear him apart. Something shifted in Andrew's expression, surprise mixing with reluctant admiration. When exactly did you become this person? About 5 minutes after I pulled you out of that alley. It's been a fast learning curve. He laughed, shaky, almost disbelieving, and pulled her against his chest, wrapping his arms around her like he could shield her from the entire world through proximity alone. You're the most impossible, stubborn, brilliant woman I've ever met. Don't forget brave. That's important too. Brave. He pressed his face into her hair, breathing her in. Terrifying is more accurate. They stood there while the city hummed outside her windows. Cars passing, sirens wailing in the distance, the ordinary sounds of Chicago at night that used to mean safety and now just marked time until tomorrow's violence. Andrew. Jayla pulled back enough to see his face. What you said earlier about the bond and what we are to each other. If I win tomorrow, You become part of my world permanently. A target. Every wolf who wants to hurt me will know exactly how to do it. His jaw tightened. Your life will never be normal again, Jayla. No quiet apartment in Pilsen. No corporate job. No pretending this world doesn't exist. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering which shadow holds a threat. My life stopped being normal the second I made the choice to help you. And I'd make that same choice again. She touched his face, felt the tension in his jaw under her fingers. Every single time. The last wall behind Andrew's eyes came down. The final piece of control he'd been holding on to, the distance he'd kept to protect them both from this exact moment. I love you. The words came out simple, certain, carrying no doubt. I know it's fast. I know the bond makes everything more intense. I know we barely know each other by normal standards. But I love you, Jayla. Not just because you saved my life or because some ancient magic says we're compatible. I love you because you're brave enough to throw yourself between monsters. Because you learned our laws just so you could use them against people who thought you were helpless. Because you make me want to build something better instead of just defending what already exists. Jayla felt something crack open in her chest, not breaking, but opening, like a door she'd kept locked finally swinging wide. I love you too. And it's not the bond.
It's you.
The man who'd rather die than compromise his principles. The alpha who actually cares what happens to his people instead of just using them. The person who makes me feel like being brave is worth the risk. Andrew kissed her. Not desperate this time, not claiming. This was promise. This was choice made conscious. This was two people looking at an impossible future and deciding they'd face it together anyway. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jayla rested her forehead against his. Tomorrow night, you're going to win. And then we're going to figure out what comes next. Together. Together. They spent the rest of the night planning for contingencies, going over Dominic's fighting style, mapping escape routes in case everything went wrong. But mostly, they just held on to each other, storing up warmth against whatever tomorrow would bring. Because in less than 24 hours, everything would change. The challenge would determine Chicago's future, Andrew's life, and whether the world they'd been building together had any chance of survival. And in a penthouse on the other side of the city, Dominic Castellano stood at his window, staring out at the skyline he considered already his. Behind him, a woman emerged from the shadows, older than she looked, power radiating off her like heat from pavement in August. You're certain about this? Her voice carried centuries. The challenge. Dominic's smile belonged to someone who'd already won. I'm certain. Because Andrew thinks he's fighting another werewolf. He thinks this is about strength and strategy, and which of us has more honor. He turned, and his eyes weren't gold like a wolf's should be. They glowed silver, cold, ancient wrong. But tomorrow night, he's not fighting a werewolf. He's fighting what I became 3 months ago when I stopped playing by the old rules. Dominic's smile widened. He's fighting something that's already dead. And you can't kill what's already dead. The woman laughed, soft, satisfied, the sound of old magic recognizing itself in new flesh. Then tomorrow night, she said, Chicago falls. And after Chicago, everything else. Episode 7. Millennium Park belonged to the wolves tonight. No late-night tourists wandering toward the bean for Instagram photos. Just darkness pooling between the Frank Gehry architecture and shadows that moved with purpose. They came from every corner of Chicago. North Side wolves in leather jackets that smelled like money and violence, South Side pack members who'd fought for every inch of territory they held, West Loop contingent in business casual like they'd just stepped out of board meetings, Lakefront pack, wearing the silver bands that marked Natasha's people. Even representatives from Milwaukee and Detroit, drawn by news that traveled through supernatural channels faster than fiber optic. Jayla stood with Natasha and Vincent at the edge of the Pritzker Pavilion, her pulse hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. The grass felt too soft under her feet. The air smelled like lake water and anticipation and something metallic that might have been fear or might have been the promise of blood. Andrew's got this. Vincent said it like prayer, like if he believed hard enough it would make it true. 6 years as Alpha King. Dominic's powerful but sloppy, all rage and no strategy. Then why do you look like you're about to throw up? Jayla's voice came out sharper than she meant. Vincent's scarred hands flexed. Because Dominic's been too calm. Even after I turned, even after we backed him into this challenge, he's acting like the outcome's already decided in his favor. Vincent's not wrong. Natasha stood rigid beside them, her alpha authority barely containing whatever was crawling under her skin. Something's off. The way Dominic accepted the challenge terms, no negotiation, no attempt to delay. The crowd parted like water around a blade. Andrew walked through barefoot, dressed in dark pants and a fitted black shirt that would tear away clean when he shifted. Every wolf tracked his movement. Some with hope, others with calculation, all of them weighing whether Chicago's former king could reclaim what Dominic had stolen. His eyes found Jayla across 30 feet of grass and gathered wolves. The bond between them pulled tight, warm, certain. Win, she thought at him with everything she had. Come back to me whole. Something flickered in his expression, promise or goodbye, she couldn't tell which. Then Dominic emerged from the opposite side of the pavilion. Jayla's stomach dropped. He moved wrong. Not limping, not injured, wrong in a fundamental way, like watching someone puppet a body that had forgotten how joints were supposed to articulate. Fluid but fractured. Graceful but grotesque. And his eyes. Not gold. Not the warm amber of wolf genetics stretching back thousands of years.
Silver.
Cold. Reflective as mirrors and twice as empty. What's wrong with his eyes? Jayla's whisper barely made it past her throat. Natasha went absolutely still beside her.
No, he didn't.
He couldn't have. What? Those aren't werewolf eyes. Natasha's voice came out flat, dead. The tone of someone watching a car accident in slow motion. He's hybrid. The word landed like a physical blow. Hybrid what? But even as Jayla asked, some instinct told her she didn't want the answer. Werewolf and vampire. Vincent's face had drained of color. It's forbidden under every supernatural treaty, the Great Lakes Accord, the Midwest Covenant, every agreement we've built to keep peace. The transformation's unstable, kills most people who attempt it. But if you survive, you become something that shouldn't exist. Natasha finished. Faster than wolves. Stronger than either species separately. Near impossible to kill because you're pulling from 2 separate supernatural sources. Her hands clenched. Andrew can't win this. Not in a fair fight. Then we stop it. Jayla started forward. Vincent caught her arm. Challenge law is absolute. No interference once combat begins. So, we just watch him die? Yes. The word came out broken. That's exactly what we do. Natasha stepped into the center of the pavilion, her voice carrying authority that made even hostile wolves straighten. By right of ancient law and council witness, I acknowledge this formal challenge. Single combat between Alpha Andrew Joshua and Alpha Dominic Castellano. Victory determined by submission, permanent exile, or death. Let no wolf interfere under penalty of execution. Fight begins now. They moved. Andrew shifted first, bones cracking and reforming with sounds like breaking tree branches, for erupting across rapidly restructuring muscle, humanity folding away into the massive dark wolf that had ruled Chicago for 6 years. Powerful, experienced, built for endurance and strategic violence. Dominic's transformation was corruption given form. His wolf was larger, wrong proportions, silver fur streaked with red like infections spreading through tissue. The hybrid genetics twisted everything. Too many teeth in a jaw that hinged wrong, eyes that glowed silver even in wolf form, movements that broke the normal limits of what bodies should do. They collided. The sound was thunder and breaking bone, and something primal that made every human instinct scream run. Jayla couldn't track it properly. They moved beyond human perception, blurs of fur and violence and blood spraying dark against grass. Andrew fought smart, using technique learned from decades of pack challenges, going for tendons and joints and vulnerable spots that would disable without requiring overwhelming force. But Dominic was faster, stronger, healing from wounds that should have ended any normal werewolf. Andrew went down hard, his shoulder torn open, blood soaking into earth that had seen too much violence already. Jayla's hands went to her mouth, trapping the scream before it could violate challenge law. Andrew got back up. Dominic's claws ripped through his flank, opening wounds that would have killed a human instantly. Andrew rolled, twisted, managed to get his jaws locked around Dominic's throat in the killing hold that should have forced submission. Dominic threw him off like he weighed nothing at all. This wasn't a fight. This was butchery with rules. We have to stop this. Jayla grabbed Natasha's arm. He's going to die. Challenge law doesn't allow interference. But Natasha's voice cracked around the edges. Then change the law. I can't. None of us can. Vincent stared at the fight, his expression carved from grief. Once challenge begins, it ends in victory or death. Those are the only options. Andrew struggled to his feet again. His left front leg hung useless, clearly broken. Blood matted his dark fur so thoroughly he looked almost red in the pavilion lights. Dominic circled him, taking his time now, savoring this. You were always weak, Andrew. Dominic's voice carried even in wolf form, another unnatural gift from whatever corruption he'd welcomed into his genetics. Too worried about honor. Too concerned with protecting people beneath you. I'm going to enjoy ruling your city. And when I'm done making an example of you, his silver eyes found Jayla in the crowd. I think I'll start with your human. Show her what a real alpha feels like. Andrew lunged. Desperation and fury burning through pain and broken bones. Dominic sidestepped with impossible speed and sank his teeth into Andrew's spine. The sound Andrew made tore through Jayla's chest like claws through silk. He collapsed. Tried to rise. His back legs wouldn't respond, paralyzed from nerve damage. Yield, Dominic growled, standing over him. Or, I finish this right now. Andrew's wolf struggled, front legs scrabbling for purchase, trying to drag his paralyzed hindquarters. Trying to get back up. Trying to keep fighting even though his body had already quit. Jayla broke free from Vincent's restraining hand and ran. The crowd gasped. Humans didn't interfere with challenges, ever, under any circumstances. She didn't care. She dropped to her knees in blood-soaked grass beside Andrew's wolf form, her hands finding his fur, her clothes immediately soaking through with his blood.
Dominic.
She looked up at the massive hybrid wolf looming over them like death taking its time. You've won. Everyone here saw it. The fight's over. Let him yield with dignity. No human gives orders to an alpha. I'm not giving orders. I'm asking for mercy. Her voice stayed level despite the terror screaming through every nerve. You wanted Chicago? You have it. You wanted to prove you're stronger? Proven. But killing him now, when he can't even stand, that's not strength. That's just cruelty. Dominic's silver eyes reflected nothing human. Maybe I enjoy cruelty. He moved to strike the killing blow. Jayla threw herself across Andrew's body, covering his neck and head with her own torso, shielding him with flesh and bone that wouldn't stop anything but might buy him one more second of life. The entire pavilion went silent. Every wolf stared. Dominic froze mid-strike, teeth inches from Jayla's spine. You think I won't kill you too? I think you're about to make a mistake you can't take back. Really? His breath was hot against her neck, smelling like copper and rot. Explain. Because killing a human witness in front of every major pack in Chicago violates exposure protocol. And unlike your ambush in Lincoln Park, this one has consequences that won't disappear no matter how many emergencies you manufacture. Bold words from someone about to die. She's right, said a new voice that carried centuries. A woman stepped through the gathered wolves, older but ageless, silver hair pulled back severe, eyes that burned with power so ancient it made the air around her shimmer. She wore a long coat despite August heat, and every single wolf in the pavilion immediately averted their gaze in instinctive submission. Natasha dropped to one knee so fast it had to hurt. Elder Morgana. Jayla had no idea who this was, but the way Dominic's hybrid form immediately backed up 3 steps told her everything. Elder. Dominic shifted back to human, naked and unconcerned about it. This is formal challenge. You have no authority to interfere. I have every authority. Morgana's voice could have frozen Lake Michigan. I am regional elder for the Great Lakes territories. I've been tracking your movements for 2 months because you've been leaving a trail of broken treaties and violated laws from here to Milwaukee. She gestured at his body. You underwent hybrid transformation without council approval. That alone carries mandatory execution. The old laws don't apply anymore. The old laws are the only thing keeping humans from hunting us into extinction. Power cracked around her like visible lightning. How many of you knew what he'd become? Her gaze swept the gathered wolves. How many witnessed the illegal transformation and stayed silent? Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. That's what I thought. She turned back to Dominic. Your challenge victory is voided. You use supernatural abilities beyond werewolf genetics. That violates fair combat rules established in 1847. Andrew Joshua retains his position as Alpha King of Chicago, effective immediately. You can't. I just did. And you have 10 seconds to shift and leave the city before I invoke elder privilege and execute you personally. Something in her eyes promised she'd enjoy it. 1. Dominic looked around desperately, searching for support, for someone willing to stand with him against elder judgment. Found nothing but wolves backing away. Even his own pack members had created distance. This isn't over, he snarled. Yes, Morgana said quietly. It is. 2. Dominic shifted, that grotesque hybrid form, and disappeared into darkness beyond the pavilion. The moment he was gone, Morgana knelt beside Jaylee and Andrew's broken wolf form. Move, child. Jayla shifted aside on shaking legs. Morgana placed both hands on Andrew's spine. Ancient power flooded out. Jayla felt it crawl across her skin like static electricity, tasted it metallic on her tongue, watched it shimmer visible in the air. Andrew's vertebrae knitted back together with sounds like wet branches bending. His broken legs straightened. Wounds closed. Blood stopped flowing. Within 60 seconds he was shifting back to human, gasping, whole. Elder Morgana. Andrew's voice came out raw. Thank this human. She bought you the 30 seconds I needed to arrive. Morgana stood, brushing grass from her coat like she hadn't just saved someone's life. We need to talk about what happens next. Dominic was right about one thing. The old ways are failing. We adapt or we die.
I'm listening. Good.
You're appointed to regional council effective immediately. Along with... Her eyes found Natasha. Alpha Kincaid. Chicago needs 2 voices now. Shared power. Shared accountability. Natasha looked stunned. Elder, I haven't. Accept or step down from your territory. Choose. Long pause. Then, I accept. Excellent. Morgana's gaze landed on Jayla. And you, human who threw herself between wolves. Name. Jayla Joanne. Jayla Joanne, you're now first human liaison to Regional Supernatural Council. Congratulations. Your job is making sure we remember humans matter when we're making decisions about their world. Report to Milwaukee next week for orientation. Jayla's brain short-circuited. I'm sorry, what? You heard me. Morgana addressed the entire gathering. Tonight's events are sealed under elder privilege. No one speaks of this, not the challenge, not the hybrid, not the human interference. Clear? Agreement rippled through assembled wolves. Good. Leave before tourists show up, and we have real problems. The wolves dispersed like smoke, melting back into Chicago's night. 3 weeks later, in a private hospital outside Milwaukee, a woman gave birth to something impossible. Dominic Castellano stood at the nursery window, looking down at the infant who shouldn't exist. Hybrid genetics passed through birth instead of transformation, creating something the supernatural world had never seen. He smiled. Chicago was just the beginning. And now he had an heir who would inherit powers beyond anything the regional council could stop. Episode 8. The plaque on Jayla's office door still looked like it belonged to someone else's life. Human Supernatural Liaison, Regional Council. She touched the engraved letters every morning like they might disappear if she didn't confirm they were real. 6 months ago, she'd been 3 days behind on rent, wearing her only interview blazer with a coffee stain hidden under the lapel, practicing answers to questions about her 5-year career plan when she didn't even have a 5-day survival plan. Now she sat in the Chicago Cultural Center with Lake Michigan visible through her window, drafting policy that would govern how 2 separate worlds coexisted without destroying each other. Her phone lit up on the desk. Andrew's name, and just seeing it made something warm unfold in her chest. Dinner tonight. My place. 7 p.m. Where something that makes you feel powerful. She smiled. They'd spent 6 months learning how to be together when together meant navigating pack politics and death threats, and the reality that being human in a supernatural world made her simultaneously invaluable and incredibly vulnerable. Some wolves still looked at her like she was a problem that needed solving. Others watched her with calculation, weighing whether the Alpha King's human mate was weakness to exploit or power to court. She'd received 17 documented death threats in the first month alone, enough that Andrew had assigned her permanent security detail. 2 wolves rotated shifts outside her apartment, her office, anywhere she went that wasn't directly under Andrew's protection. But she'd carved out space anyway. Natasha had become something unexpected, not quite friend, not quite mentor, but someone who understood what it meant to hold power in a world designed to crush anyone who looked like weakness. She taught Jayla the unwritten rules of pack hierarchy, how to read dominance displays, when to push back, and when strategic silence carried more weight than words. Vincent checked in weekly, updating her on territorial movements, potential threats, the constant low-level violence that simmered under Chicago's supernatural surface. He'd helped her understand the warrior mindset. How wolves measured worth in scars and loyalty, how combat wasn't just violence, but communication in a language older than civilization. Even Elder Morgana called occasionally from Milwaukee, her ancient voice offering guidance that felt less like advice and more like downloading centuries of accumulated wisdom directly into Jayla's overwhelmed brain. And slowly, painfully, incrementally, one small victory at a time, the supernatural community was learning to accept her. Last week she'd mediated a territorial dispute between 2 Southside packs that had been one dead wolf away from full war. She'd sat in a warehouse that smelled like rust and rage while alphas shouted at each other in 3 languages, and she'd found the compromise neither of them had seen because they were too busy defending territory to recognize they both wanted the same thing: safety for their people. 3 days ago, a young wolf named Marcus. No, not Marcus. She'd promised not to use that name. A young wolf named Darius had been arrested for assault after defending himself against humans who'd figured out what he was and decided to make a viral video out of hunting him. Jayla had used every human connection she'd built, called in favors from lawyers and activists and people who owed her from her previous life, and gotten him released with charges dropped before exposure became inevitable. Small victories that added up to something that might eventually look like progress. Her office door opened without knocking. Natasha's signature move. Brought coffee. Natasha set a cup on Jayla's desk, then folded herself into the chair across from it. You look exhausted. I am exhausted. That alderman meeting drained 5 years off my life. The South Shore Development Project? He wants to know why I'm blocking it. I can't exactly explain that the land is sacred wolf territory without triggering an exposure incident. Jayla rubbed her temples. I went with environmental concerns, endangered species habitat, protected wetlands, every bureaucratic angle I could manufacture. Did he buy it? He agreed to table the vote for another month. After that, I'll need new ammunition or an actual miracle. Natasha sipped her coffee, studying Jayla with that unsettling alpha intensity that felt like being dissected by someone who could see all your internal organs. You're good at this. Better than anyone expected. Thanks. I think. It's a compliment. Most humans would have cracked under the pressure by now. You're still standing. Natasha paused. Have you heard from Elder Morgana about Milwaukee? The warmth in Jayla's chest iced over instantly. She called yesterday. Dominic's still hidden, but there are confirmed reports of hybrid transformations spreading, 3 in Minnesota, 2 in Wisconsin, 1 possible case in Iowa. Someone's teaching the process, distributing whatever corrupted magic or science makes it work. He's building an army. Natasha said it flat, stating fact. Morgana thinks so. And if he is, Jayla couldn't finish.
Didn't need to.
They both understood what was coming. Not today. Maybe not this year. But eventually Dominic would return with enough hybrid wolves to challenge not just Chicago, but the entire regional structure. And when that happened, the fight wouldn't be about territory or power. It would be about whether the supernatural world could survive what it was becoming. Andrew's preparing. Natasha set her cup down. Strengthening pack alliances, coordinating training protocols, building intelligence networks across 6 states. He won't be caught off guard again. I know. But I also know Dominic. Jayla's hands tightened around her own coffee cup. He's patient, strategic. He'll wait until we're comfortable, until we think we've moved past the threat, and then he'll strike exactly where we're weakest. Then we eliminate weakness. Natasha stood, moved to the window overlooking the Chicago skyline. Speaking of Andrew, he asked me about jewelry last week. Jayla's brain stuttered. What? What kind of jewelry you prefer? Metal, stones, style? Natasha glanced back, something almost playful in her expression. I told him silver with emeralds. You're welcome. You think he's proposing? Obviously. The man looks at you like you're the only thing keeping gravity functional. Plus, he's been impossibly nervous the past week, which for an Alpha King means something significant is happening. Jayla's heart did something complicated in her chest, fear and hope and the terrifying realization that this was real. This life, this love, this impossible future she'd stumbled into 6 months ago was actually happening. I should go. Natasha moved toward the door. But Jayla, whatever he asks tonight, you've been good for him. For all of us.
Don't doubt that.
Andrew's penthouse occupied the top floor of a Gold Coast building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago River and the downtown corridor, the city spread out below like scattered diamonds on black velvet. When she arrived, security detail checking the hallway before letting her exit the elevator, Andrew stood by those windows, backlit by the skyline. Dark slacks, white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, looking every inch the Alpha King who'd fought his way back from death and political exile to reclaim his city. Then he turned and saw her, and his expression went soft. Vulnerable. Completely, devastatingly human. You're beautiful. Jayla glanced down at her black dress. The same one she'd worn to the Drake Hotel Gala 6 months ago, the night everything had started careening toward this moment. You said we're something powerful. This was the most expensive thing I own. It's perfect. You're perfect. He crossed the space between them and kissed her like oxygen had become optional, his hands framing her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything about his reputation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I need to tell you something. Jayla's stomach dropped. If this is about Dominic. It's not about Dominic. Well, not directly. Andrew took her hand, led her to the leather couch facing those impossible windows. Sit with me. She sat. He knelt in front of her. Jayla's heart stopped completely. 6 months ago, Andrew began, his voice rough with emotion he wasn't bothering to hide. I was dying in an alley off Michigan Avenue. Betrayed by my own people, bleeding out on pavement that smelled like garbage and defeat, and a woman I'd never met risked everything to save me. She had no reason to help, no logical explanation for why she'd sacrifice her future for a stranger who might have been dangerous. But she did it anyway. And in that moment, my entire world shifted. Andrew. Let me finish. His hands tightened on hers. You've spent 6 months navigating impossible situations, death threats, Pack politics, a world that sees you as either weakness or threat depending on which wolf is looking. You've been attacked, threatened, thrown into the deep end of supernatural society with no preparation and no guarantee you'd survive. And you've handled all of it with more courage and intelligence and grace than anyone I've ever known. You've made me a better alpha. A better man. You've made me want to build something instead of just defending what already exists. He released one of her hands to pull a small box from his pocket. Jayla Joanne. I know we haven't known each other long by human standards. I know my world is dangerous and complicated and will never be normal. I know that marrying me means spending the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering which threat is real and which is just noise. But I also know that I don't want to face any of it without you beside me. Will you marry me? He opened the box. The ring caught light from the skyline and threw it back transformed, silver band with an emerald centistone flanked by diamonds that looked like captured stars. Jayla stared at it through tears that made everything blur beautiful. Natasha told you about the emeralds. She had extremely strong opinions about color, cut, setting, and what would look good on your hand specifically. I got a 40-minute lecture on jewelry philosophy. It's perfect. So, is that a yes? Jayla looked at him. This impossible man who'd been willing to die rather than compromise his principles, who'd fought his way back from betrayal and exile, who looked at her like she was the reason gravity worked.
Yes.
Absolutely, completely yes. Andrew slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her off the couch and into his arms, kissing her like she was the answer to every question he'd been afraid to ask. When they finally broke apart, both laughing through tears, he said, "Fair warning, being married to the Alpha King comes with obligations. Council meetings, political dinners, official events where every wolf in the room will be watching to see if you make a mistake they can exploit." Sounds terrible. It really is. Good thing I love you then. Good thing. He kissed her again, softer this time. We should probably discuss logistics. Where we'll live, how we'll balance your work with council obligations, whether you want a traditional wedding or something smaller. Tomorrow. Jayla pressed her finger to his lips. We can plan tomorrow. Tonight, I just want to be engaged to you without thinking about everything else. I can work with that. They spent the rest of the evening wrapped around each other on that couch, talking about futures and fears and all the beautiful, impossible things they were building together. Outside those windows, Chicago glittered and hummed, full of secrets and danger and the constant low-level violence that came with keeping two worlds separate. But inside Andrew's penthouse, for that one perfect night, they had everything they needed. Later. Much later, when they'd moved from the couch to Andrew's bed, tangled together in sheets that smelled like him and safety, Jayla's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She almost ignored it. Then she saw Elder Morgana's name and her stomach dropped. Email. Subject line. Urgent. Milwaukee situation escalating. Dominic confirmed sighting. 3 hybrid wolves with him. Emergency council meeting scheduled 72 hours. Your presence required. Do not travel alone. Details encrypted file attached. Jayla showed the email to Andrew. His jaw went tight, muscles coiling under skin, the alpha rising to surface before he pushed it back down. Then he set the phone aside deliberately and pulled her closer. Tomorrow, he said quietly. Tomorrow we deal with Dominic and the council and whatever war he's building.
But tonight?
Tonight is ours. Jayla looked up at him. Her fiancé, her mate, her partner in every way that mattered.
Deal.
And for that one perfect night, while Chicago slept and threats gathered and the future waited with teeth bared, they let the world fade away. Because tomorrow they'd be warriors again. But tonight they were just 2 people who'd found each other against impossible odds and decided that was worth fighting for. So there it is. Jayla went from missing a job interview to becoming engaged to Chicago's Alpha King. And their story? It's nowhere near finished. If you made it this far, and you still haven't subscribed to Gracie Werewolf Story Bank, I need you to drop a comment right now explaining why. Seriously. Tell me what country you're watching from. Tell me if you want more of Jayla and Andrew's story. Tell me if you need to know what happens when Dominic returns with his hybrid army. Because here's reality. Channels like this survive when viewers like you actually engage. Hit that subscribe button. Smash the notification bell. Share this with someone who loves supernatural romance. Leave a comment about your favorite moment. And if you don't, you'll miss what comes next. Dominic's building something that could destroy everything. The hybrid army is growing. And Jayla and Andrew's biggest fight hasn't even started yet. Don't say I didn't warn you. This has been Gracie Werewolf Storybank. Until next time, stay wild, stay fierce, and remember, the best love stories always start with impossible choices.